The Drive with Tim Donnelly, 99.9 The Fan. There's a saying, right? The gift that keeps giving. What's the opposite of that? The trade that keeps taking. The trade that keeps getting worse and worse and worse by the day. Mm-hmm. The Bryce Young trade by the Panthers is the trade that keeps taking. Keeps getting worse. So for those of you that haven't seen, the Bears traded for Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, stud wide receiver, has been really, really good. Actually, from North Carolina.
Yeah, he is.
He had a, I don't even know how to describe his career. Legendary career with the Chargers. He's probably at the top of some record books, near the top.
He's been kind of quietly one of the better receivers in the NFL over the last 10 years.
He was traded from the Chargers to the Bears for a fourth-round pick. And what you don't realize is that fourth-round pick, along with the offensive tackle Darnell Wright, who was drafted in the first round back in the draft that Bryce Young was drafted in, those were a trade-down package. So the Keenan Allen fourth-rounder stems directly from the Carolina Panthers trade to acquire Bryce Young, the number 1 overall pick. So the Bears' return for the number 1 overall pick stands as follows. First-rounder offensive tackle Darnell Wright, wide receiver Keenan Allen, cornerback Tyreek Stevenson, who's becoming a solid NFL player already, wide receiver DJ Moore, still the first overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft to come, and still a second-round pick in the 2025 draft to come. Imagine being the Panthers right now, right? I'm even Panthers fans. Imagine being imagine being Scott Fitterer right now, who has to just watch this trade get worse and worse. The Panthers and fan base and us, we were so excited to bring in Deontay Johnson on a bargain trade. I call it the first thing that Dan Morgan could stand and take a bow for, right? It was taking a player you were going to cut in Dante Jackson, turning it with a little bit of a fairy dust and I don't know, like a bit of love, and turning it into a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL in Deontay Johnson. I thought it was awesome. And then the team you traded with, not a week later, is using the trade and everything you sent them to surround their young quarterback with your guy, DJ Moore, and now Keenan Allen. They are who you want to be. Deontay Johnson isn't as good as DJ Moore. And whoever else is your number 2 wide receiver is nowhere close to Keenan Allen. And they're preparing, meaning the Bears, are preparing to put this incubator, this nest of wide receivers around the number 1 overall pick that you gave to them. They are taking your number 1 overall pick and showing you what you should have done with their number 1 overall pick that you traded for. Caleb Williams is going to be the number 1 overall pick for the Chicago Bears by all accounts, right? It's just the formality and there you go. He will be in such a much better situation when he gets to the league than Bryce Young was in when he got to the league, and it didn't have to be that way. Mm-hmm. It didn't have to be that way. The Bears simply understand that to bring in a number 1 overall pick, you should make sure there are certain things in place prior to their arrival on the game field. Wide receivers that can get open might be one of those things. They definitely are. The Panthers didn't do that. And because Bryce Young, maybe his development was permanently stunted, and at the best case scenario, it was halted for a year until you could put something around him. This is how you set your franchise back. I'm not going to go into the actual deal, but I was just having this conversation with some buddies. I am in a dynasty fantasy league, which means we keep our team every year, right? Yeah. We don't redraft every
fantasy
year.
Degenerate.
I am a fantasy degenerate. Someone in my league made a trade. We're talking months and months ago that he looking back wishes he doesn't make. Like he wishes he didn't make that trade. And he's like, the amount of agony that I get from this dynasty trade that I wish I didn't pull the trigger on is brutal. And then somebody else in the group chat immediately chimed in with, can you imagine if you made the Bryce Young trade?
Yeah.
If you're months later still harping over a dynasty fantasy football trade, which I'm not going to go into the details of because nobody cares, but I will tell you is not nearly as detrimental to his team as the Bryce Young trade has been to the Panthers. And goodness gracious, right? Do you know who the Panthers should be sending a nice bottle of wine to?
Who's that?
Whoever made the Russell Wilson trade for Denver, because or even better, whoever made the Deshaun Watson trade for Cleveland, because those are the only things that are keeping me from calling this Bryce Young trade the worst of the last 20 years. Those trades might be worse, but it doesn't actually make the Bryce Young trade better. It just makes it relatively not as bad.
Well, and here's the thing as well. Look back, even the San Francisco trade for Trey Lance, probably even worse. But they struck with Brock Purdy.
Yeah, that's no harm, no foul. No harm, no foul. It's you bet $1,000 on Duke to win the ACC tournament, but you pulled a scratcher and won $1,000. It's like, hey, you know what? Net zero. We're back to where we started. We're good. That's what the San Francisco 49ers did. The football at 4 conversation about the Bryce Young trade is they haven't hit the scratcher to right all their wrongs yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Things are still getting worse by the day. And draft day is going to hurt. When you watch Caleb Williams walk up there and hold up the Chicago Bears jersey, it's going to hurt. You know what else is going to hurt? The 2025 draft, when a second rounder is still going to Chicago. And it feels like the Bryce Young trade was centuries ago.
Yeah.
And you're still going to be there's actually I'm going to go across I'm going to go a cross sport analogy here. There was a point in time where Dwight Howard I want to say was on the Sixers, and the Magic were still making picks that had like matriculated from the Dwight Howard trade when they traded him to wherever it was, the Lakers, because they got a first round pick and they traded down and got a future second. Then they traded that future second for 2 future seconds. And it was like, when you looked at all of the things that they turned the Dwight Howard trade into, it was unreal. That's going to happen with this, because Chicago next year is going to take that second rounder and they're going to trade back to a third, but the third is going to be in 2027, and we're going to be 5 years from now, and it's still going to be going, hey, you know that Pro Bowler for that 4th rounder that turned into a Pro Bowler for Chicago? That was part of the Bryce Young deal.
It was a result of it. Yeah.
And if you don't turn around the Bryce Young deal, meaning if you don't turn around Bryce, you're going to look at this and it is going to hurt. Offensive tackle, a position of need for the Panthers. Well, you could have had Darnell Wright. Wide receiver, a position of need for the Panthers. Well, you could have had DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. Cornerback, a position of need for the Panthers. Well, you could have had Tyreek Stevenson. Oh, well, then you wouldn't have Bryce Young. You wouldn't have a quarterback. You could have been drafting Caleb Williams or Drake May or Jaden Daniels or whoever your soup du jour would be. And guess what? Oh, we'd also still need an edge rusher. Well, you'd have a second round pick in 2025 to address that. It's brutal when you really break it down.